I was 14 when my mother told me she was getting married again. She said it like it was good news, like I was supposed to smile and clap and feel happy for her. I tried. I really did. But something about the way she avoided my eyes told me this wasn't just a new chapter for her, it was the end of one for me. She had been dating him for less than a year, and suddenly he was everywhere. Sitting in my spot on the couch. Eating dinner with us. Telling me what I should and shouldn't do. His name was Richard, and from the very beginning, he looked at me like I was an inconvenience he hadn't signed up for. At first, my mom tried to balance things. She'd tell me, "You'll always be my first priority." But actions speak louder than promises. The wedding came fast. Too fast. And after that, everything changed. Richard didn't like noise. He didn't like attitude. He didn't like that I reminded my mom of her life before him. Slowly, rules started appearing out of nowhere. Curfews. Restrictions. Comments disguised as jokes. "You're too old to be this dependent," he'd say, right in front of her. She'd laugh awkwardly instead of defending me. The first real fracture happened when I overheard them arguing late one night. Richard said I was holding her back, and that she couldn't fully commit to their marriage while still raising baggage from her past. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding, waiting for my mom to shut him down. Instead, she said nothing. Silence can be louder than yelling, and that silence told me exactly where I stood. A month later, she sat me down at the kitchen table. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Maybe it would be better if you stayed with your aunt for a while," she said. I stared at her, confused. "Just until things settle down," she added quickly. I looked at Richard. He didn't even pretend to feel bad. He just nodded, like this had already been decided. I asked her if I had done something wrong. She said no, but she still packed my bags. Living with my aunt felt temporary at first. Like a pause button had been pressed on my real life. But weeks turned into months, and my mom stopped calling. When I did visit, Richard made sure I felt like a guest, not family. My room was turned into his office. My photos disappeared from the walls. I learned then that being replaced doesn't always happen dramatically. Sometimes it happens quietly, piece by piece, until you realize there's no space left for you at all. By the time I turned 18, I was completely on my own. My aunt helped where she could, but she had her own family. I worked part-time, then full-time. I learned how to budget, how to survive, how to stop expecting emotional support from the one person who was supposed to give it freely. I stopped asking my mom for help because every request felt like I was interrupting her new life. She'd answer my calls distracted, always saying she was busy or tired. Richard's voice was always in the background. Years passed. I went to community college, then transferred to a university on scholarships. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. I slept 4 hours a night and told myself it was temporary. Pain became normal. Independence became survival. And slowly, without realizing it, I stopped missing her. That hurt more than anything else. In my late 20s, things started to change. I landed a solid job in finance. Promotions came faster than I expected. I was careful with money, maybe too careful, because I had learned what it felt like to have none. By 30, I was doing better than anyone in my family. I didn't broadcast it. I didn't brag. But success has a way of finding its way back to people who once doubted you. That's when my mom started calling again. At first, it was casual. "I was just thinking about you," she'd say. Or, "I saw something that reminded me of when you were little." I kept my responses polite but distant. I didn't trust the sudden warmth. Experience had taught me that love from her now always came with conditions. Richard was still around, still controlling, still the center of her universe. I could hear it in how she spoke, always checking with him, always justifying him. Then one night, her voice sounded different. Smaller. Fragile. She asked if we could meet in person. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. We met at a quiet cafe. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. Nervous. She held her coffee cup with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her steady. After some awkward small talk, she finally said it. "Richard took my money." I didn't respond right away. She explained in pieces, her words tumbling over each other. Investments. Business opportunities. Promises of returns. He had convinced her to transfer money into accounts under his control. At first, it was small amounts. Then larger ones. By the time she realized something was wrong, it was too late. $80,000 gone. Savings. Retirement. Everything. My stomach tightened, but not with sympathy. With clarity. She looked at me with desperate eyes. I don't know what to do, she whispered. He says it'll come back. But I think he scammed me. She paused, then added the sentence I had been bracing for. I was hoping you could help me. You're good with money. You always were. There it was. Not an apology. Not regret for choosing him over me. Not acknowledgement of the years she abandoned me. Just an expectation. A belief that I would step in and clean up the mess created by the man she had chosen over her own child. I stared at her across the table and realized something important. This wasn't about money. This was about consequences. About choices. About loyalty misplaced and trust broken. She had chosen him when I was powerless. Now she was powerless, and she wanted me to choose her. I told her I needed time to think. That night, I didn't feel anger. I felt something colder, something sharper, a sense of balance finally shifting. Because for the first time, the roles were reversed. And I knew whatever happened next would define our relationship forever. I didn't sleep much after meeting my mom at the cafe. Not because I felt sorry for her, but because my mind kept replaying every moment from my childhood that led us here. The way she used to look at Richard when he spoke, like his words mattered more than mine. The way she slowly stopped asking about my school, my feelings, my fears. The way she chose peace with him over protecting me. And now, after all these years, she was looking at me the same way she once looked at him, hoping I would fix everything. The next morning, she called me before I even finished my coffee. Her voice was anxious, rushed. She asked if I had thought about what she told me. I told her I had, and that we should talk again, but not over the phone. She agreed immediately, relief dripping from every word. We met at her house this time. The same house I had grown up in, the same house I had been quietly pushed out of. Walking through that door again felt strange, like stepping into a life that no longer belonged to me. Richard wasn't home. My mom said he was out handling business, which sounded exactly like the excuses she used to make for him when I was younger. The house felt tense, like it was holding its breath. We sat at the dining table, and she laid out everything. Bank statements, loan papers, investment contracts that barely made sense. It was worse than I thought. Not only had he taken the money, but he had also convinced her to co-sign loans in her name. The total damage was even higher than $80,000. As she talked, I didn't interrupt. I just listened, not as her child, but as an outsider looking at the wreckage of someone else's choices. She kept saying things like, I trusted him, and, I didn't think he'd do this to me. At one point, she looked up and said, You warned me once, didn't you? I nodded. I had warned her years ago, back when my opinion still mattered just enough to be ignored. She swallowed hard. I should have listened. Then she asked the question she had been circling the entire time. Can you help me? She said quietly. I don't know anyone else who can. I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. I told her I could look at the paperwork, explain her options, and help her understand what happened. Her shoulders relaxed instantly. But then I added, I won't give you money. The relief on her face vanished. What? She whispered. I told her calmly that I wasn't her emergency fund. That I had built my life without support, without a safety net, and I wasn't about to risk my stability for the man she chose over me. She tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I told her that helping didn't always mean paying. Sometimes it meant telling the truth. And the truth was that Richard had taken advantage of her because she let him, just like she had let him push me out of her life. She cried then. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quiet tears sliding down her face. She said she didn't realize how much damage she had done until now. She said she thought she was choosing happiness, not abandonment. I believed she believed that. But belief doesn't erase impact. I told her I would help her report the fraud, talk to a lawyer, and protect what little she had left, but only if she did one thing first. She asked what it was. I told her she had to confront Richard. Not later, not gently. Now, she had to demand the truth, set boundaries, and stop protecting him. If she wasn't willing to do that, I was done. She hesitated, fear flashing across her face. Fear of losing him. Fear of being alone. The same fears that had driven every bad decision she'd ever made. Finally, she nodded. Richard came home that evening, confident as ever. He smiled when he saw me, like we were on friendly terms. I didn't smile back. My mom asked him to sit down. She showed him the papers. Asked him where the money was. His reaction was instant anger, followed by charm, followed by blame. He said she was overreacting. He said investments take time. He said she didn't understand how money worked. I watched her crumble under his words, just like she used to crumble when he criticized me. Then I stepped in. I told him I had reviewed everything. That I knew the accounts were empty. That the companies he claimed to work with didn't exist. That the money was gone. His face changed. Just for a second. Enough to tell me everything. He tried to laugh it off, but it sounded forced. He told me I didn't belong there. That this was between husband and wife. I told him he stopped having that privilege the moment he committed fraud. He stood up, furious, and told my mom to choose, him or me. The room went silent. For a moment, I thought history was about to repeat itself. But something different happened this time. My mom stood up too. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. She told him to leave. She told him she had already spoken to a lawyer. That she would report him if he didn't cooperate. He stared at her in disbelief, then laughed cruelly and said she wouldn't last a week without him. He left that night, slamming the door behind him. For the first time in years, the house felt quieter. Emptier, but lighter. My mom sank into a chair and looked at me like she didn't recognize herself. I should have done that for you, she said softly. I nodded. Yes, I replied. You should have. Over the next few weeks, I helped her in practical ways. I connected her with a lawyer. I walked her through the legal process. I helped her freeze accounts and document everything. Richard disappeared, just like he had done with her money. The case moved slowly, but it moved. And throughout it all, I kept my distance emotionally. I didn't move in. I didn't offer financial support. I didn't play the role she wanted me to play when I was younger. She noticed. She started apologizing more, not just for choosing Richard, but for the years she ignored my pain. Some apologies felt sincere. Some felt desperate. I accepted none of them fully. Not yet. Trust, once broken, doesn't come back with words. It comes back with time and consistency. One evening, as we sat in silence after a long day of paperwork, she looked at me and said, I know I can't ask you to save me. I looked at her, surprised. But I hope, she continued, that one day you'll forgive me. I didn't answer right away. Forgiveness wasn't something I could promise. But I did promise her this, I wouldn't let her drag me down with her again. The legal process dragged on for months, slow and exhausting, but I stayed involved just enough to make sure my mom didn't sabotage herself by going back to Richard. That was my one condition, to help, not to save. Some days she was strong, firm in her resolve. Other days she sounded small again, asking if I thought he might come back and fix things. Each time, I reminded her gently but clearly that there was nothing left to fix. The man she loved didn't exist. He never had. Richard was eventually located, not because he wanted to be found, but because patterns always repeat. He tried the same scheme on someone else, and that person fought back faster. When the cases connected, his lies finally collapsed. My mom didn't get all her money back, but she got enough to survive. More importantly, she got the truth confirmed by someone other than me. That mattered to her more than she admitted. When the dust settled, she expected something to change between us. I could see it in how she spoke to me now, softer, more careful. She invited me over more often, asked about my life, my work, my plans. For the first time in years, she was trying to be a mother again. But time doesn't rewind just because regret shows up late. I didn't reject her effort, but I didn't rush to reward it either. One afternoon, she asked if I ever thought about moving back closer to her. The question hung in the air, heavy with hope. I told her no. I had built a life elsewhere. A life that existed because I had been forced to survive without her. She looked disappointed, but she nodded. I think in that moment, she finally understood that consequences don't disappear just because lessons are learned. A few weeks later, she invited me to dinner. She said she wanted to talk about something important. When I arrived, the house looked different. Simpler. Richard's furniture was gone. His presence erased. After we ate, she handed me a folder. Inside were documents transferring partial ownership of the house into my name. I looked at her in shock. She said she wanted to do something right for once. Not as payment, not as guilt, but as accountability. I didn't accept it immediately. I told her I needed time. I needed to be sure this wasn't another emotional decision driven by fear of losing me again. She agreed. No pressure. That alone told me she had changed more than any apology ever could. A month later, after talking to my own lawyer, I agreed to it, with conditions. Clear boundaries, legal protections, transparency. She signed everything without hesitation. Our relationship didn't magically heal after that. We didn't become close overnight. But it became honest. She stopped pretending the past hadn't happened. She stopped asking me to fix her life. And I stopped carrying the weight of being the child who was left behind. We met as two adults now, uneven, imperfect, but real. The real revenge wasn't watching her lose money or seeing Richard disappear. It wasn't saying no when she needed me most. The real revenge was becoming successful without her help and refusing to let that success be taken from me. It was setting boundaries she couldn't cross. It was choosing self-respect over resentment. One evening, months later, she said something that stayed with me. Losing you back then was the worst decision of my life, she said quietly. I looked at her and replied, and losing myself would have been worse. She nodded, accepting the truth without argument. I didn't walk away from her life. But I also didn't run back into it. I stood exactly where I belonged, on my own terms. And for the first time, that was enough.